Welcome to AFO Wealth Management Forward, a podcast powered by Arrowroot Family Office that's at the intersection of accounting, wealth management, behavioral finance, technology, and entrepreneurship. We help accounting firms and financial advisors grow their practice by going beyond the numbers as we learn from industry leaders and subject matter experts to discover the secret to their success. A podcast that highlights everything from the transformative power of AI to embracing the human-first approach of behavioral finance to help you understand the psychological and emotional relationships to money and meaning. Here is your host, Rory Henry, Director at Arrowroot Family Office and author of Holistic Guide to Wealth Management.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I have another couple of great contributors here on our ongoing series for the Holistic Guide to Wealth Management panel discussion. Today, I'm joined by Christine Nicholson. She is an multi-award-winning business mentor, succession strategist. She's also authored 4 books and is a regular keynote speaker about succession and exit planning. Christine, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thanks very much. It's a real pleasure to be here, and it was a real pleasure to contribute to the book.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm glad to have our next guest with us today. He is the founder of Two Hawks Family Office Services. He's a nationally known wealth strategist as well as philanthropic estate planner. He's also an educating speaker. He's currently the editor-in-chief of Plan Giving Design Center. So without further ado, let me introduce my friend Randy Fox. Randy, welcome to the panel.
Oh, thanks, Rory. Nice to be here again. Always good to see you.
Yeah. So let's
nice to meet you, Christine.
Yeah, we had a fun little talk for our recording here, talking about Dicumbi Mutombo and all the works he's done. So hopefully we can give our audience some entertaining content here. Let's start out, Christine, and talk about the importance of exit planning. Because I know in the book you stated, or highlighted that only 3 in 10 family-owned businesses make it to the next generation. Can you talk about why that is and ways in which we can improve that for folks?
Yeah, sure. I think when you're a family business, there's a kind of tendency to think that the next generation will just go with the flow. They will go with whatever you're thinking as the primary generation. And that might have been the case for like the last 8 generations. It certainly was in my family, but it is not the way forward now. The current generation, they got way more choice. So it's really time to start thinking about now, and the earlier you do this, the better it is first of all, what do you want when you leave the business, whichever way you're planning to leave it, and then what's the best way for you to then let go, confident that the next, and it doesn't have to be next generation of your family, but it is going to be the next generation of something that's going to take over your business. And actually make a plan for that. Because if you wait and assume that someone is just going to step up, or you think that just when you shuffle off the perch that somebody else will pick it up, then there's that whole saying of, if you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. And then never ever has that been truer than in family businesses right now. And it isn't ever going to get any easier.
Yeah. I know there's ego involved here. And Randy, I know you talk about in your chapter how, many folks or business owners out there, when they're doing succession planning, they feel like they're heading to the elephant graveyard. So can you kind of talk about the mindset here when in working with, or for practitioners when they're working with business owners, how to shift that to welcome, proper estate planning here, exit planning, I'm sorry.
It's such a complex and complicated topic, Rory, since every single individual business owner is a different human being, and they have different values and beliefs, and they have, different goals and objectives. That often what we're seeing, at least in the first generation of the family business, they created it. It was their idea. They built it from nothing, probably working nights, weekends, holidays, missing out on family events, and built it into whatever it is today. If it's something they're willing to exit at some point, that means it has some value. But it's more than a capital value. It also has emotional value. And so getting all those pieces to line up and getting someone to let go is always a challenge. So it doesn't come easy. It requires lots of conversations and lots of thinking before you even begin to talk about, what's the most efficient or most tax efficient way
Tax efficient.
to leave with the most money in the pile.
Yeah. I know you talk about role identity fusion there, Christine. That goes into, a lot of business owners equating their self-worth with their business worth. In the book, I reference some of the behavioral finance work done by by the Clances, and how our relationship to money is formed in our childhood. And one of the money scripts is called money status, where we equate our net worth with our self-worth. But a lot of business owners equate their self-worth with their business worth. So you can kind of elaborate on that and how we can kind of separate the two and have them drive the increased enterprise value of the firm?
Absolutely. I'm just going to go a bit off-piste for a second, though.
Yeah.
Because it's fundamental part of the human psyche that if we think about the 3 points of a triangle, we've got wealth being, the physical, financial, the cash in the bank, or whatever you're going to have cash in the bank from a liquidity event. So you've got the wealth being. And then you've got the health being. And one of the first things that business owners sacrifice when they're chasing the wealth is they sacrifice their health being. And sometimes they do that very unconsciously, or they think that they're bulletproof and they can ride through absolutely anything, because when they were younger, it could happen. And then you have the well-being. And for me, well-being is the 7 inches between your ears. And that can be wrapped up in ego. Within a business, it's usually stress, sweat, and sacrifice is all, they're physical things, but they're wrapped up in you are willing to make those sacrifices because of these 7 inches. And when you put that triangle in the context of this fetishizing of entrepreneurship, where you only hear the success stories. So you're now driving these 3 elements towards anything less than 8 figures and I'm failing. Anything less than something I can sell or hand over and I'm failing. Anything less than these icons that are basically worshipped, idols that are worshipped on TV. And then you've got you referred to the role identity fusion, which is positively reinforced by both the fetishizing and by things like I think over there you call it Shark Tank, we call it Dragon's Den, where someone will come on, present their business idea, and the first thing the dragons or the sharks will say is, well, it's a great idea, but you're not investable. Or it's a great idea, and you are investable. And of course, mentally, that from an entrepreneurship perspective, that means that you're fusing the idea with me. That means I am got to be the most important thing in whatever business I create. And it's, if we can separate that, if we could find an easy way of doing it, to be honest, if we could just kind of like build it into an essence, put it into some spray perfume, I'd be having the equivalent of Lynx Africa.
Yeah, like love potion number 9, you have business potion number 9.
Yeah, absolutely. But when you see these ideas and they're literally being reinforced all the time when they're actually false ideas, it makes it really difficult, because it's so easy to tag on to and hold on to something that feels comfortable because you're seeing it reinforced all the time.
Yeah, and if the business owner hasn't made himself operationally irrelevant to his business, the letting go is so much harder.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about how we can help them let go and reconnect to passions. Because there's a lot of research out, and Andy, you probably know this too, about retirement and how, the biggest sign of well-being in retirement is relationships. And the relationships we have with our partner, and then finding passions outside of work. I love the work of John Garrett, who's a podcast host. He has a book called What's Your And he talks about how we have all these hobbies and interests outside of work, but we don't really bring that into the workplace. So can you talk about some of the work that you do with families out there, how to connect with their passions and not be so focused on the work?
Are you asking me?
Oh, it was Randy.
So
Yeah, I was going to say which one is up.
Sorry.
Well, I think retirement from a business owner is almost the wrong word. Many business owners are, not capable of retirement.
Right.
I think that they're just, that's not who they are. I think people who work for some company who get a paycheck, find it easier to walk away and do nothing because they haven't loved what they've done their whole life.
Yeah.
Business owners doing what they do because they love it. They wouldn't make all the sacrifices if they weren't passionate about what they did. So really what we have to ask the business owner is, where are you going to direct your energy and passion when you're not doing this? And that could be a number of things. My gig is philanthropy. How do we get them involved in causes bigger than themselves? Most of the business owners I know haven't had time to learn to play golf. They, maybe they go fishing once a year with their buddies, but they're not going to go retire and go fish for 8 days a week. They've got to do something meaningful with the rest of their lives, as well as build and nurture the relationships that are going to sustain them through, the balance of not going to the office every day.
Yeah.
And they need to find that way before they finish.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely. This is one of the biggest things that when I'm working with clients, I wore this fleece quite deliberately for today because it says trypophobia, the fear of not having something planned. And I live and breathe the concept of only working 9 days a month myself. Now it's come down because it used to be 15 days a month. And then it used to be 24/7. So, I am trying to find purpose. So I'm going to do this in 2 ways. I have found purpose in other things. So volunteering, for example, and using entrepreneurship as a route out of homelessness, or using entrepreneurship education as a route out of reoffending and not going back to prison. And they're great things to have that give me great purpose. But I also then do things that I find purpose in. So I adventure hike, for example. I'm loving the background for Randy's because Randy's Zoom thing, because actually already I'm thinking, where is it? How do I get there? And what is there to find? What is there? What adventure is there? And it doesn't have to be, I'm not a thrill seeker. I'm just finding purpose in these activities that like-minded people do. So I think it's really important to start thinking about purpose way before you need to find it.
Yeah, I know, Randy, in the book you talked about planned giving and helping families out there find their purpose. I think you stated that, families, especially the wealthy ones, aren't necessarily looking for performance. They're really asking for purpose. So can we double click on that and ways in which we can help them find that through things like planned giving?
Well, yes. And again, taking some capital off the table. And again, the successful business owners have this fine balance. We have to have enough money for them to do whatever it is they're going to do for the rest of their lives, spend it however they want to spend it, live the life they want to live. But usually there's more than enough. And so, and again, this is just some of the business owner mentality. Every business owner I've ever met, and Christine, you can disagree with me, they hate paying tax. Have you ever met a business owner who says, I signed me up, I want to pay more tax. I've never paid enough. So if we can direct some of the capital and, we can, regardless of your politics at this very moment, we certainly are uncovering some looks like misspent capital by our government. If we can say, look, if we could take some of that capital that might have gone to some program you really don't care about and direct it to programs that you might care about, and
Yeah.
not only use that money, but also all of your skill and your talent and the capability that you had to build this business into something. What would that look like, and what could you do, to make the world a better place? Not that your
Yeah.
business didn't make the world a better place, it probably did. But
Yeah.
how do you translate that into the rest of the time you have to do something meaningful in the world? And that's just one approach, but that's an approach we take all the time. And again, most business owners aren't used to thinking that way. In fact, I probably get, out of every 10 introductory calls I get from an advisor, 9 of them say my client isn't charitable. That's the first, that isn't the fifth thing they say. That's the first or second thing. We want you to do planning, but by the way, they ain't charitable. Right?
Yeah.
Now, when you talk to them, they've sponsored the little league team. They're on the board of their church. They've been in the PTA. They've done all these things that are charitable. They just don't think of themselves as philanthropists, because those are words that kind of tie to Rockefeller or Gates or, whatever generation you're from. But the point of the fact is that they've given to their community their entire lives. They've provided jobs. They've provided, things in their community. They care about where they're on the Rotary Club or the Kiwanis Club, if they're still around. They've been active. They care. How do you translate that into something bigger that is more sustainable? And again, it's just us advisors having better conversations with our clients, and instead of talking about capital gains tax,
Right.
talking about, what do you really care about in your life?
Yeah. That's the values-based exercise that I outline in the book, that if we lead with values-based planning, our businesses decisions, our personal finance decisions, and in essence, our life decisions can emanate from those values.
No question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
I
kind of
completely agree.
shift talks a little bit here, because I know, Christine, you advocate for a multidisciplinary approach. You're really bringing a team together. I think it was in our last podcast, or maybe you put in the book, that you said that many folks or business owners have comfort zone advisors, their buddy next door, right? Their golfing buddy who advises them their finances. Can you kind of talk about the importance of building that great team, a virtual family office, we call it in the book, to really drive growth?
I really want to reinforce what Randy just said as well about the relationship aspects. So I always think of a business as, it's 3 layers. There's the central layer is me, it's around the individual. And then you've got the team, and then you've got the company as a whole. So there might be but if you think about your life, then there's you, then there's your family, and then there's your wider community.
Network.
And that can be your business and your team. And somewhere between that family and your business, there's this really narrow ring of, that's what I call the trusted advisor ring. And these are usually, you've got to know, like, and trust them. But most of them will not have done anything to do with exit before, because that is a really small group of people. Many will be having their financial advice from somebody who is really just selling them products, and it's just a commoditized arena. And therefore, given that you really, your knowledge comes from the people that you spend the most time with, and you don't necessarily spend the time with the people who are going to do this one-off thing for you. Because, typically most business owners exit one business. About 50% of them exit their business due to unplanned events, and they might have prepared for some of those unplanned events. I mean, I'm talking about, death, disease, disability, divorce. These are people that where your wealth advisor is probably advising you around these 4 things. Hardly ever advising you about the 5th D, which is, if you cannot work in your business is likely to be distressed. It's likely to be extremely distressed within 12 months. And then who do you go to? And it's likely to be an extension of your comfort ring, your comfort zone of people who are already within your trusted circle. And they are not likely, or very rarely, are likely to refer you to someone outside of that very trusted circle, which leaves many business owners devoid of the kind of really harsh advice. And it's tough being told your business is potentially unsaleable, or it's worth a whole lot less than it should be, or actually you probably need to completely restructure it because you've been employing all your mates for the last decade and your business is totally unscalable because of that. You know, all these bad news things. Your friends are unlikely to give you bad news because it's fairly common. Like I do it and I'm very conscious of it, but I still do it. I default to shooting the messenger who's telling me the bad news. And then I have to pull my ego back and say, actually, this person is giving me some reasonable advice.
And again, many business owners started with the guy who, filed their incorporation papers and have stayed with them for 25 or 30 years and have outgrown. Same with their accounting firm, typically. And certainly in all but the rarest of circumstances, those professionals, as good of people as they are and as loyal as they are not the people to get to the next level. They're not going to get you out of the business. They're not going to know how to handle the negotiations and the structure of the sale and all of the necessary things that will enable the business owner to go to the next phase of their life.
Let's speak about the structure of that sale for the audience, Randy, because I know in the book you talk about DAFs, charitable trusts, you talk about pooled income funds. I know you're big on the goodwill hunting and separating personal goodwill for enterprise goodwill. So can you give our audience a little bit of meat there on how we can structure things to really have that tax efficiency, lifetime income, and produce great outcomes for those clients?
Yeah, and again, we look at every transaction completely as its standalone. It's its own self. What's the best way to get the result we're trying to get? What we do find, just as in general, the businesses we deal with tend to be S corps because that's what everybody's been doing for the last 40 or 50 years, and no one wants to buy their stock. S corp sales are almost one in 100 or something. One of the things that many transactions fail to look at is the owner's personal goodwill, and I'll give you an example. Late last year, not the end of 23, actually, we had a gentleman who ran a very large plumbing company. Built it. It was a very quintessential business owner, right? Started with one truck, built it up to a very big business. Private equity was coming along. He was getting to be the right age. And they, it's a $30 million, cash money. Are you ready? It was interesting because everybody was going, he lived in California. By the time you took out the tax, it was a big hit. So one of the things that no one talked about in his existing team, his CPA, his attorney, we were brought in by his financial advisor, who's someone we've known for years and years and years, who didn't really have a good idea. We proposed the idea of using his personal goodwill, which is an asset of the company, a zero basis capital asset. And we have done this several times where we do a bifurcated sale. There's one check written for the personal goodwill. There's one check written for the rest of the assets. Prior to the sale of the personal goodwill, and by the way, personal goodwill is a zero basis capital asset. We transferred that personal goodwill to a charitable trust that's called a pooled income fund. That personal goodwill was redeemed from the pooled income fund, which means there was no capital gains tax paid. And by the way, the client got a significant charitable income tax deduction to offset some of the tax on the rest of the sale. So when you do, and I mean, it was such a case for personal goodwill. His caricature was on the billboards. They had a they had a cartoon of him that
Yeah.
made the ads.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like it was easily defendable as to a third of the sales price being his name, image, and likeness.
Yeah.
He would make a great college basketball player, I suppose.
Yeah.
So the this is often overlooked in these complex sales transactions. And if you can carve up the sale, so we didn't say take all your money and put it someplace in a charitable structure. That would be malpractice as far as I'm concerned. We said, what if we could carve off enough so that we could eliminate tax on a third of the sale, get a tax deduction? And by the way, you'll get income from this asset for the rest of your life. That's a pretty good win for the client. And that's just one of the things we look at whenever we're involved in, what's the best way to, now that someone's ponied up and, put an offer in front of you, is it going to work? Are you going to be able to live the life you want to live?
Yeah. And Christine, I know you said that I asked you before, when should we start exit planning? And you should say we should start exit
5 years
planning.
ago.
Well, she says when you open the business. You talk about the importance of let's have the end in mind. I always say estate planning, exit planning, you really look at the end in mind and you can reverse engineer decisions from there.
Yeah. I mean, because the danger is that, when you're starting up, you've got all that vigor and enthusiasm. But actually, you're totally focused on your first job, getting your first client. And then, of course, you're focused on the second job, getting your first client to pay you.
Yeah.
And before you know it, you've kind of got lost in this maelstrom, which means you actually forget that you started this for a reason. And the three big reasons that get forgotten are, this financial freedom, the ability to make choices about what you're going to do in the next phase of life, living today like most people won't, because so that you can live tomorrow like most people can't. And then you forget the other freedoms that you have, the freedom of choice of how you spend your time, because you're drowning in the minutiae and the tyranny of firefighting in every day, because now your ego is just so tied up in, if I'm not there, then the business will fall apart. That's absolutely not true if you set it up right. And actually, the irony is that by calling it exit planning, it kind of shoot yourself in the foot, because now you're only thinking it's the end, not the now. It's almost like we should really be including this exit planning in the startup plan. The startup plan should be, what on earth am I doing this for? And it should be reminding you every day. It's almost like something like an affirmation that you write on your mirror every day, because the absolute right time for exit planning is usually the day before something happens to you that stops you actually doing everything that you want to. So when you're working 80 hours a week and every time you employ someone new, you just think, why are my hours going up the more people I employ? And then you're signing off the payroll at the end of the month and you're the last one to be paid. And you've forgotten all of the reasons why you went in the first place, which is generally to make an impact and then to have choice and opportunity. And that those choices generally relate to freedom. And those freedoms generally relate to time, location, and money.
Yeah.
And the only one you're focused on, that you tend to focus on because it's so tangible, is money. But I don't know a single person who lies on their deathbed and wishes that they'd spent more time at their desk. Like literally zero people.
Yeah, and maybe I want to throw this over to Randy here, as we can kind of weave in inheritance. And Warren Buffett always says, I want to give enough money to my kids so they can do something, but not enough that they can do nothing. So and I'm big on a statement of financial purpose in working with families to have that statement and mission statement that they can look to have their decisions emanate from. So can you kind of talk about how we can have these conversations? I mean, money's such a taboo topic. So I write about in the book that we need to have open and honest conversations and bring the next generation along, so they don't just have $1 million dropped in their lap that they can do anything with. So can you kind of talk about the importance of really starting those conversations?
Well, $1 million or 10 million.
Yeah, 10 million.
It's very interesting. Worked with a family a few years back, husband and wife, very successful family. Um, both were the presidents of boards of charities locally, and it just as because they were passionate about their community and passionate about these organizations, and they loved being involved, and they had never ever told their kids why. And it's so puzzling to me that if there's a value to transfer, if there's something that you want to teach your kids about the responsibility to your community and the responsibility to with your wealth, this was the golden opportunity. And yet they had never communicated that. And I think that just points to the fact that outside of sex, that money is probably the most taboo subject in our vocabulary.
Yep.
And I actually think that in 2025 that sex is actually less taboo.
I agree.
We do not, as a nation, educate our kids about handling finances, talk to them about the family and what the family stands for, and the family, and if the family happens to be, regardless of the financial success, what money means to us, what we can do with it, what power it has. Our kids get that by accident. And sometimes those messages aren't good or healthy. So how in the world can we expect that if we're, and again, it's this dichotomy, right? We've got this money we've earned. Where else are we going to leave it but to our kids? But we don't take the time to prepare them to receive it. And then you wonder, somebody sent me a video today. Oh, it's terrible. You got all these despondent kids because they inherited $10 million and they're bored. Well, that problem happened 20 years ago. It didn't happen now. But the only way we can begin to mend this problem is to start those conversations today. Like Dikembe Mutombo, we were talking about earlier. Why aren't my kids in first class? Right? They haven't earned their way here yet. It's exactly that. I have a number of people say, oh, I don't want my kids to know we're wealthy. Well, wait a minute. You fly private. You have a 40-foot yacht. You think they don't, and you're driving an Aston Martin. You think they don't know you have money. Are they stupid? We know they're not. So why don't we just start to have dialogue about, you don't have to tell them about the dollar amount, but you can tell them that there is money going to be left to you, and here's how we've structured things so that you're safe from harm. And we want to make sure that you understand what these resources mean to you and what you could possibly do with them, knowing that you're need to go out and start a big enterprise maybe isn't as great as other people's, but what are you going to do with the rest of your life?
It's having those conversations. And like I said, if we have those values-based conversations, we can help, align the next gen with making better decisions on where they want to go. It goes back to that relationship with money conversation that I talk about through the book. You just had something to say, Randy?
We can do the best job of structuring and having asset protection and divorce protection and all of the things that to preserve the wealth for multiple generations. I mean, that's a given in what we can do. But if the children don't have the guidance and motivation and the understanding, it's just going to confuse them. It's not going to make them happy.
And it's going back to the well-being, aspect of what we do. I always say that folks trust us with intimate information, right? Their business finances, right? And many times as practitioners, we might be the only people that they can have these intimate conversations with regard to their business, regard to, their kids. And so we sit in a privileged position to be able to guide them to where they want to go in life based on our know-how.
I'm always amazed at the conversations that I end up having with business owners. Like within minutes, they'll be telling me things that they they've been in business for 30 years and they've never discussed it with their wife or their husband. I mean, most of my clients are men. I wish that there were more ladies, but I tend to work with engineers. And, but they'll literally be within 2 minutes telling me things that they had not discussed with their wife for the last 30 years. And then they'll be telling me things about their business. And I say, well, look, if you got hit by a car tomorrow, and literally you were just poof, you didn't exist anymore. How would your family cope with not only picking up the mechanics of the business, but then, the service that the business does in your life in terms of providing not only income, but also the future capital wealth, your future financial security. And they've never discussed that with anybody. And sometimes they've not even discussed it with their wealth management advisor or their financial advisor at all. It's just, oh, well, I think the business is worth about this month. An unqualified advisor won't even question that. And it still always amazes me how there's two numbers that always come out. If it's a smaller business, they'll think that they're worth $5 million, even if they're only worth, well, I say typically less than 500,000. Yeah. And then the next number is $30 million. And I don't know where it is in the psyche. I have no idea. I can only assume that it's a kind of inflation from the 1950s and 60s, where to be a millionaire was quite a state. Yeah. So now it's 30 million, and to be honest, it's probably gone up since then. I mean, it's now the whole idea of being a billionaire just seems so that the thing to talk about. But it's all very well having a billion. You have a billion in the bank by all means. But what do you do with it? Because when it's stuck in the bank, it's not serving anybody. It's not serving you. It's not serving your family, and it's not serving society. So I really agree with the whole financial education across generations. I know people who are 60 and they still get their wives to run the finances of their household. If they had to pay a bill, they would be lost. But they run sizable businesses. And there's just this disconnect between the different types of finance and also the understanding of what keeps society running, what keeps society positive is the flow of cash, the flow of wealth between not only different generations, but different classes, different communities, and society as a whole.
And if you look in the United States, is it 80% of the jobs are provided by family-owned businesses, and something like, what is it, 70 or 80% of the GDP? It's not Apple, and it's not General Motors, and it's not Amoco. Or BP Amoco. It's these small businesses.
Small businesses, the backbone of our economy.
Yeah, that's what we call. And again, just to circle back, my partner actually had a client who created this entire plan so that his son could take over the business. And as they were sitting down to get everything executed, the son called my colleague over and pulled him aside, and he said, I never wanted the business. Father had never talked to his son about whether or not he wanted the business. Matter of fact, son wanted to move out of town and do something completely different. And so, it's that dramatic that the communication is so poor that we don't even know what our kids want.
That actually comes back down to that role identity fusion as well, because there's the whole situation, particularly in small and medium-sized businesses and mid-tier businesses, is if you own it, you have to control it. You have to be there. So ownership and being in attendance is fundamentally one and the same thing. And if you psychologically can separate ownership, so it's okay for the family to own it. They don't need to be working in it. I mean, how many of you have got shares in part of your portfolios, particularly in your retirement funds? If you were working, you'd have a retirement portfolio. You've got an investment portfolio, and let's say you've got BP shares. You're not knocking on the door of BP saying, I've got shares, give me a job. And actually they wouldn't even need, they'd go, get away from me, crazy person.
Yeah.
And they'd send security out there. So why do we have a different attitude towards our own businesses? And well, the answer is because we're emotionally involved. And the first thing we've got to do is let logic in and get the emotion out. But saying it, dead easy. Doing it, not so much.
Not so much. Well, this has been awesome, Christine and Randy. I appreciate you coming on and contributing to the book. Do you want to have any final thoughts for our audience here? I'll throw it to Christine first.
Yeah, if I can just advise people to do one thing, if they just do one thing tomorrow to really make a difference to their lives as business owners, it is mentally take that 7-inch step to divorce your emotional attachment to your business and just think of it as a mechanism for generating and creating the wealth that is going to give you and your family and your community that future financial security.
I like it. And Randy?
Yeah, I think most business owners are business owners because they couldn't work for anybody else.
Yeah.
And I never could. And part of the reason that you want to be a business owner is for freedom. And what many business owners forget is that they're doing this for their own freedom, and they become slaves to their business,
their own business.
And then the business runs them. And that's not healthy for anybody. So there's just so many opportunities for people to change the way they think about their business, and the way they think about their family and their lives, that there's just a huge, and especially at this time in history with the baby boomers sort of aging out, there's so many businesses in transition, and doing it wisely and doing it well is a lost art.
Yeah, I used to say there's $2 trillion in dry powder sitting on the sidelines here. Wouldn't be allocated.
Something like that.
Yeah, a little. Yeah. So yes, there's opportunity out there. I want to appreciate you. I appreciate you both coming on this discussion. Like I said, it contributes to the book. If someone wants to reach out to find more or learn more about what you do, what's the best way to do so? I'll go to you, Randy, first.
Websites, Two Hawks Family Office Services, or Randy at twhawksfos.com. That's probably the easiest way.
All right.
And for me, it's really easy. ChristineNicholson.co.uk. Christine Nicholson, all one word. And I talk extensively about the behavioral aspects, finding purpose, etc. But actually, it's the practical things about getting out of the day-to-day, including not being locked in to your business. Because it is that freedom word. It means so much, and yet for so many people it's kind of out of reach. But it's not. The reality is it's right here. It is literally, the power is at the end of your fingertips. You've just got to take the 7-inch journey to get there.
When you fuel purpose with some practical steps, you can live the life that you want. I appreciate you both coming on. I'll put all that information in the show notes. Hope to have this chat again. Thank you,
Rory. Thanks for having us.
It's fantastic. Thank you.
All opinions expressed by Rob Santos and Rory Henry on this website podcast interview are solely their opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Arrowroot Family Office LLC or their parent company or affiliates, and may have been previously disseminated on television, radio, internet, or another medium. You should not treat any opinion expressed by anyone as a specific inducement to make a particular investment or follow a particular strategy, but only as an expression of their opinions. Past performance is not indicative of future results.